Hello and welcome. I am Ellie Richardson and you are watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US financial markets see extreme volatility as sharp swings in gold and silver, and equities lead to $9 trillion movement in capitalization. Trump continues trade war with Canada with renewed threats of decretifying Canadian-made aircraft and charge a 50% tariff on those planes. Towns in Australia's southeast swelter in temperatures close to 50 degrees Celsius as wildfires rage through parts of rural Victoria. US President Trump signals restraint on Iran, saying he hopefully won't need military action and plans direct talks, while Pentagon officials affirm readiness in Europe. The EU brands Iran's Revolutionary Guards a terrorist group, sparking protests in Brussels and warnings from EU leaders that the region can't afford another war. Trump announces a brief ceasefire in Ukraine, claiming Russia has agreed to halt shooting, and Putin agreed to spare Kyiv during harsh winter cold. Ukrainian President Zelensky urges US support to stop Russian strikes on energy infrastructure as the EU blacklists Russia over money laundering risks. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer praises real progress from his China visit, focusing on trade and ties, but President Trump calls it very dangerous for Britain to engage with Beijing. Donald Trump teases a new Federal Reserve Chair announcement next week, with potential frontrunners in the spotlight as he ramps up criticism of the central bank's policies. Trump credits Hamas for facilitating hostage returns and hints at their potential disarmament as bodies of Palestinians returned by Israel arrive at Gaza hospitals amid fragile peace talks. And for your top story this hour, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for urgent dialogue between the United States and Iran to prevent a crisis with devastating consequences. His remarks come amid escalating tensions between both countries, with US President Donald Trump warning Iran to strike a nuclear deal or face far worse consequences. Trump urged Iran to negotiate a fair deal on nuclear weapons, emphasizing the importance of coming to the table before the time runs out. Meanwhile, Iranian officials have warned of retaliation against the US and its allies if military action is taken. Tensions have risen as a US naval force led by the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln heads toward the region. Let's listen to what the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had to say.
It's important that there is a dialogue allowing for an agreement in relation, namely, to the nuclear question, and that we can avoid a crisis that could have devastating consequences in the region.
We are now being joined by Peter Baum, who in London, who is an editor of Weekly Blitz. Thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World today. What does the UN Secretary General's call for new talks between the US and Iran reveal about the risks the world faces in diplomacy fails?
Good day, Ali. Thanks for having me on. Yes, I think this statement by Antonio Guterres, was to be expected. That's his role. but increasingly he is becoming an irrelevant bureaucrat on the world stage. I don't think there's been, I think there's just been one meeting of the UN Security Council about the Iranian protests and the thousands killed. And increasingly, this man is being ignored. I think Trump has only had one meeting with him since Trump's been in office. And I don't know what the feeling is in South Asia, although I can guess. But in Europe, the UN Secretary General is seen as just a puppet of the United Nations, which is increasingly becoming the theatre of the absurd. One would expect for him to make a statement like that, but he's only stating the obvious. And in fact, dialogue is going on. We've just heard overnight that Trump has said he will speak, he's speaking to the Iranians. We know that Qatar, Turkey, Oman, Saudi and the United Arab Emirates are trying to act as mediators and are having dialogue with the Iranians. We know that Russia is. Overnight, in fact, before the UN Secretary General made that statement, an Iranian plane, government plane, landed in Moscow. So really his comments are just, I guess, what one would expect from someone, but no one is really paying attention to this man as an individual, and the United Nations is being bypassed, and only the interested actors are having a say in what's going on with the potential conflict that's going to happen in Iran.
What is urgent right now? What is he trying to alert people to prevent?
Well, given his role, one would expect nothing less from this man, but he is being increasingly isolated because he has no power and the United Nations is being bypassed. Obviously, he's alerted. Everyone knows what the problems would be, what the potential disaster would be of a major conflict in Iran. Trump has actually been the one saying, look, come to the table. This is what I want from you Iranians. And it's the Iranians who are sticking their feet firmly on the ground and saying, no, we will not compromise on these issues. As I understand it, Trump has wants Iran to completely stop the nuclear missile program and to stop arming the proxies and to cut down on the number of ballistic missiles they have in their armory. They also want, they've given, as I understand it, they will allow safe passage to the senior members of the Iranian regime, some of whom have already left to go to Moscow, as I understand it, and I think some of the regime's diplomats abroad have asked for safe haven in places like France and Switzerland. So this dialogue is ongoing. The UN Secretary General has just stated the obvious, and but he's being bypassed. No one, not one of the nations involved in this potential conflict is looking to Guterres for input.
Can Iran and the United States find common ground for meaningful dialogue if Tehran insists negotiations?
Well, of course, the answer is one lives in hope. But given the build-up of the American military capabilities in the region, it seems destined to end in some kind of conflict. Now, a couple of things have happened recently. 2 Iranian ships have been sunk in the Caspian Sea. One 2 weeks ago, which received very little attention. It was an arms-carrying ship to Russia, the Rona, and yesterday the Caspian Shiva, an Iranian-registered ship, was also sunk in the Caspian Sea, also carrying arms to Russia, we think. Overnight, there's been a drone attack on the Iranian prosecutors' house. The Iranians have come up and said he survived the assassination attempt, although we've yet to see him in public. So given all that, plus the American military build-up, plus the slaughter of Iranians on the streets, it's highly unlikely, sitting here now, that there seems that a political compromise can be reached, although Trump would prefer that on his terms, which at the moment seem to be unacceptable to the Iranians, although they are being pressured, as we spoke about yesterday, by the Turks especially, who don't want to see hundreds of thousands of Iranians swarm into Turkey, being pressured by Oman, by Saudi now, by the United Arab Emirates and by Qatar to come to some compromise, which, as I say, at the moment, the Iranians don't seem to want to do.
Thank you, Peter. Don't go too far, as we will come back to you in just a moment. US President Donald Trump has announced that the United States would open Venezuela's commercial airspace, allowing American citizens to safely visit the country. He also revealed that the US oil companies are scouting Venezuela for potential investment opportunities. These moves follow a conversation between Trump and Venezuela's acting President Delcy Rodríguez. Let's listen to what the US President had to say.
And I just spoke to the President of Venezuela, informed her that we're going to be opening up all commercial airspace over Venezuela. American citizens will be very shortly able to go to Venezuela, and they'll be safe there. We have the major oil companies going to Venezuela now, scouting it out and picking their locations. And
this comes as Rodríguez signed a major reform of Venezuela's hydrocarbons law aimed at attracting foreign investment and boosting the country's oil and gas production. The new law reduces taxes, enhances autonomy for private producers, and allows for asset transfers. Rodríguez highlighted that the US administration, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, informed her that Venezuela's airspace restrictions would be lifted, paving the way for airlines and investors to return. Rodríguez also announced Venezuela's first ever export of natural gas, signalling a new chapter for the nation's energy sector. The US Treasury Department eased sanctions on Venezuela's energy industry to support this transformation. Let's listen to what the acting president of Venezuela had to say.
Yo quiero informar que el día de hoy recibí una llamada del presidente de los Estados Unidos, Donald Trump, y de su secretario de Estado, Marco Rubio, donde se informa que en el marco de la agenda de trabajo de la cual hemos conversado y hablado, estamos dando pasos importantes. Y estamos hablando de que cesen las restricciones en el espacio aéreo comercial de Venezuela. Que vengan todas las aerolíneas que tengan que venir. Que vengan los inversionistas que tengan que venir. En las próximas horas, ustedes van a ver un video que nos va a hacer sentir muy orgullosos. Y será nuestra primera exportación de la primera molécula de gas en la historia de Venezuela. Ya el barco está en Venezuela y lo veremos partir en las próximas horas y yo compartiré ese video con nuestro pueblo. En esta ley está la visión de futuro del presidente Nicolás Maduro, porque hay quienes piensan que esta ley la sacamos así, de repente. No, esta ley la habíamos estudiado ya, su reforma, junto al presidente Maduro, y yo me siento emocionada de poderle decir desde Caracas, su tierra natal, presidente Maduro, estamos cumpliendo con usted, estamos cumpliendo con la primera combatienta y estamos cumpliéndole al pueblo de Venezuela.
We are now being joined by Ambassador Vishwanathan, who was a former ambassador to Venezuela. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. How might the combination of Venezuela's new oil reform law and the US easing sanctions to reshape global oil markets and foreign investment in the region?
Is it more than American investment and profit in Venezuela? Venezuela needs desperately to revive its oil production and exports. You know, for the last 100 years, Venezuelans have been addicted to oil. So they have neglected agriculture, industry, mining, and other sectors, depending totally on oil. Now, in the last several years, because of American oil sanctions and other sanctions, the country's oil production and exports have been completely strangulated. On top of it, now the Americans have blockaded the ports and the airports, airspace. So so Venezuela desperately needs to get out of this jail imposed by Trump, and they need to revive the oil production exports for reviving the economy. So they need it much more. So they need to open the oil sector because the oil company does not have the money, does not have the latest technologies, does not have materials and equipments because of the sanction they couldn't buy anything for maintenance and repairs. So they need it desperately. That is why they have to open up the oil sector for foreign companies to come in. Under the existing law, only the national oil company, the PDVSA, that was in charge of production and exports, and foreign companies could be minor partners, as was Chevron. Chevron was operating there as a minor partner. So, but now what the Americans are saying that, no, we want to be a major partner, we want more stake, and we want to have more autonomy and control of our operations. And the sharing of oil income, that formula also has to be revised. Venezuela has no other choice.
And does easing US sanctions signal a strategic reset with Venezuela or tactical move driven by energy needs?
Not by energy needs. The United States doesn't need Venezuela's energy at the moment because right now there is a glut in the oil market. And the United States is the largest oil producer in the world. So they don't need it now. But of course, if Iran and Russia, because of these things, they want to keep this option open. One of the reasons why Exxon is saying that, Venezuela is not investable is because, they have invested in Guyana, they have invested in other places, and the oil price is low, and there is a glut in the market. That is the reason.
And what are the political and diplomatic implications of the US reopening commercial airspace over Venezuela and encouraging American airlines and oil companies to return?
Venezuela needs it desperately to get out of this stranglehold. But anyway, I want to point out to you, right now, Venezuela is not the news. The news is Cuba. While Venezuela is coming out of this strangulation, Trump is strangulating Cuba. He says he will impose tariffs on anyone who supplies oil to Cuba. Venezuela was the major supplier. They stopped. And the second biggest supplier was Mexico. Now, they have also halted because of the threat of Trump. And Russia used to be a minor, and Algeria used to supply small quantities. So now everyone is stopping. Now, Cuba is going to run out of oil, in another 2-3 weeks or so. And they are in a desperate situation. The economy is likely to collapse, and there is going to be a catastrophe. So that is going to be a major disaster. It's the immediate impact of this Venezuelan crisis.
Can these economic and commercial shifts help stabilize Venezuela's economy and society after years of crisis?
Of course, because the Venezuelan economy and development oil sector had been strangulated by American sanctions for the last several years. So it need to be eased. And in any case, all these sanctions are illegal. It was not imposed by United Nations. It was all unilateral. Not only they wouldn't allow American companies, but they wouldn't allow Indian or other companies to go into Venezuela or to supply things. So it is an illegal one. So the Americans need to ease these sanctions.
Do you think, in your opinion, that this risks Venezuela's deepening dependence on US influence?
Can you repeat it?
Do you think that, in your opinion, that there's a risk that Venezuela is deepening their dependence on US influence?
No, I wouldn't call that. As I told you, the economy and the country had been strangulated and crippled and paralyzed by United States. So they have to get out of that. You can call it as dependence, but you can also call it as unstrangulation and getting out of that. It is important and it's needed immediately, and Venezuela needs it desperately. But in any case, you see, United States used to be the main market for Venezuelan oil. Over 80% of the oil exports of Venezuela was going to United States. It's only after Chavez came to power, he reduced it and he diversified to India, China, and so on. And then because of the sanctions, everything stopped. So Venezuelans wouldn't be unhappy to sell oil to United States and revive the old connection and the market of US for the Venezuelan oil. In any case, many of the refineries in the Gulf Coast in the United States, they were meant for this kind, the Venezuelan kind of crude, because the oil companies in America were importing the Venezuelan crude in the olden days.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Viswanathan, for joining us here on NewsX World. Niger's military leader, Abdel Amathani, has accused the French, Benin and Ivory Coast presidents of sponsoring the recent attack on Niamey International Airport. He has, however, made the claims without offering any evidence. The attack, described by security sources as a terrorist attack, occurred on January the 29th, just before midnight, with gunfire and explosions heard near the airport. But calm returned to the capital by yesterday morning. Now Niger's military leader has vowed retaliation, while also signalling growing tensions between Niger and its neighbours, whom he views as French proxies. He has also expressed gratitude towards Russian troops stationed at the base for their support. Let's listen in to his statements.
Le matin, la base aérienne ou l'aéroport international Diori Hamani de façon plus large a fait l'objet d'une tentative d'infiltration par des mercenaires téléguidés. C'est l'occasion pour nous de venir prendre contact avec l'ensemble des forces de défense et de sécurité, ainsi que nos partenaires russes, pour leur prompte réaction.
The military rulers in Niger, like those in neighbouring Mali and Burkina, have turned to Moscow for help. Severing ties with Western powers, this shift is part of a larger trend in the Sahel region, where Russian influence is growing. The attack on Niamey International Airport left one French national dead, according to Niger State Television, though the details remain unverified. US and African Union officials have met in Addis Ababa to finalise a new partnership deal aimed at enhancing ties between the two sides. According to reports, the agreement establishes a task force focused on boosting infrastructure and investment, a move hailed as beneficial for both parties. Mahmoud, chairperson of the African Union Commission, emphasised that mutual benefits of the partnership, stating that Africa and the United States need each other for resources, expertise and investment. This sentiment was also echoed by US Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau, who highlighted the economic and commercial opportunities Africa offers. The joint statement confirmed that the task force will focus on strengthening economic partnerships, improving economic security and creating jobs. Additionally, it stressed the importance of high-quality infrastructure to enhance trade and drive Africa's economic growth. We are now being joined by Ambassador Mahesh Sajavar, who is a former diplomat in New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. What strategic interests might the United States and the African Union each be pursuing by creating this task force? And how could it reshape US-Africa ties in the long term?
Thank you for having me. This is an important question for Africa as well as for United States policy towards Africa. United States has been slipping down Africa's main partners due to its focus on United States itself and to other countries in the New World. Africa used to supply the United States with large crude requirements, but United States is now self-sufficient in crude as well as in natural gas. So trade with Africa has fallen, and now Africa counts United States as its fourth or third largest trading partner. First being the Chinese, second being the European Union, and third being India. The total trade that United States has with Africa is less than a quarter of China's total trade, and investments by the Chinese are also way ahead of United States. So to recoup the distance and to re-establish United States reasonable profile in Africa, this working group has been founded with the African Union. But questions remain as to how would this working group help restore United States primacy in Africa. There are a couple of reasons. It's for investment and trade, but United States is unlike China, which has state-sponsored investment in Africa. United States, the investment is made by the private companies, multinationals, etc., which are not bound by whatever is decided in Addis Ababa between United States State Department representative and the African Union Commission. Secondly, I think the United States is not so much interested in infrastructure building in Africa. It has its own infrastructure requirement in the United States, for example, where infrastructure development has lagged, and Mr. Trump is trying to revive it. Thirdly, I think the United States' need for Africa is more for the critical materials, including rare earths, etc., which is where United States would be looking for, and these are mostly found in sub-Saharan areas, particularly in the South-Central Africa, such as Mozambique, Congo, DRC, and others, South Africa being another one of them. Last but not the least, Mr. Trump has taken no worthwhile initiative with regard to Africa, except sending this Deputy Secretary of State level team to Africa in his second year of second term. So it remains to be seen whether this initiative in isolation would be helpful. It would be helpful, but to what extent would it restore United States as among the primary partners of Africa remains to be seen. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador Mashev Sadiev, on NewsX World. China has unveiled ambitious plans to launch space-based artificial intelligence data centres over the next 5 years. According to state media, the project, led by China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, will integrate cloud, edge and terminal capabilities to enable data from Earth to be processed in space. The initiative is expected to provide a challenge to Elon Musk's SpaceX, which plans to deploy solar-powered AI data centres in orbit. Both countries see space as a crucial frontier in their evolving AI landscape, with China aiming to become a world-leading space power by 2045. This comes as both nations also compete in deep space exploration and the military strategic advantages of space dominance. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.